Neck, read by Tom Hollander.
When about 8 years ago old Sir William Turton died and his son Basil inherited the Turton Press as well as the title, I can remember how they started laying bets around Fleet Street as to just how long it would be before some nice young woman managed to persuade the little fellow that she must look after him. That is to say, him and his money. The new Sir Basil Turton was maybe 40 years old at the time, a bachelor, a man of mild and simple character, who up to then had shown no interest in anything at all except his collection of modern paintings and sculpture. Naturally, the vultures started gathering at once, and I believe that not only Fleet Street, but very nearly the whole of the city was looking on eagerly as they scrambled for the body. But to everyone's surprise, the little chap proved to be remarkably elusive. Then, round about the beginning of August, the girls declared a sort of truce amongst themselves while they went abroad and rested and made fresh plans for the winter kill. This was a mistake, because precisely at that moment a dazzling creature called Natalia something or other, whom nobody had heard of before, swept in from the continent, took Sir Basil firmly by the wrist, and led him off in a kind of swoon to Caxton Hall, where she married him before anyone else, least of all the bridegroom, realized what was happening. You can imagine that the London ladies were indignant, but we don't have to go into that. In fact, for the purposes of this story, we can skip the next 6 years, which brings us right up to the present, to an occasion when I myself had the pleasure of meeting her ladyship for the first time. By now, as you must have guessed, she was not only running the whole of the Turton Press, but as a result had become a considerable political force in the country. Last Thursday I went to this small dinner party at a friend's in London, and while we were standing around in the drawing-room before the meal, sipping good martinis and talking about the atom bomb and Mr. Bevan, the maid popped her head in to announce the last guest. "Lady Turton," she said. Our eyes swung round to the door, waiting for the entrance. She came in fast, tall and slim, and in a red-gold dress with sparkles on it, and my heavens, I must say she was a beauty. The hair was black, and to go with it she had one of those pale, oval, innocent 15th-century Flemish faces, almost exactly a Madonna by Memling or Van Eyck. At least, that was the first impression. Later, I got a closer look and saw that except for the outline and colouring, it wasn't really a Madonna at all. Far, far from it. The nostrils, for example, were very odd, flaring and excessively arched. This gave the whole nose a kind of open, snorting look that had something of the wild animal about it, the mustang. A few minutes later we went into dinner, and to my surprise I found myself seated on her ladyship's right. I presumed that our hostess had done this as a kindness to me, thinking I might pick up some material for the special column I write each day in the evening paper. I smiled and made a little bow. She didn't smile back, but started shooting questions at me, rather personal questions, job, age, family, things like that. During this inquisition it came out among other things that I was a lover of painting and sculpture. "Then you should come down to the country sometime and see my husband's collection." And that was how, on the following Saturday afternoon, I came to be driving down to Wootton with my suitcase in the back of the car. As you know, Wootton is one of the truly great stone houses of the early English Renaissance. Like its sisters, Longleat, Woolerton, and Montacute, it was built in the latter half of the 16th century, when for the first time a great man's house could be designed as a comfortable dwelling, not a castle. As I drove into the forecourt, I noticed with rather a shock that the fountain basin in the middle supported a large statue by Epstein. A lovely thing, mind you, but surely not quite in sympathy with its surroundings. The door was opened by a young footman who led me up to a bedroom on the first floor. Her ladyship, he explained, was resting. Now, in my job it's necessary to do a lot of weekending, and as a result I've become fairly sensitive to unfamiliar atmosphere. I can tell good or bad almost by sniffing with my nose the moment I get in the front door, and this one I was in now I did not like. Later, I was sitting on the bed when softly the door opened and an ancient lopsided gnome in black tails slid into the room. He was the butler, he explained, and his name was Jelks, and he did so hope I was comfortable and had everything I wanted. I told him that I was, and had. "Her ladyship will be down at 7 o'clock. So will Major Haddock and the others." I noticed there was a trace of a sneer around the corners of Jelks's nose. He spoke the words with the outsides of his lips, as though he were nibbling a lemon. Then he slipped out of the door, leaving behind him a certain dampness in the room, and a faint smell of embrocation. Shortly after 7, I found my way to the main drawing-room, and Lady Turton, as beautiful as ever, got up to greet me. "I wasn't even sure you were coming," she said. "I'm afraid I took you at your word, Lady Turton. I hope it's all right." "Why not?" she said. "There are 47 bedrooms in the house. This is my husband." A small man came round the back of her and said, "You know, I'm so glad you were able to come." He had a warm smile, and when he took my hand, I felt instantly a touch of friendship in his fingers. "And Carmen La Rosa," Lady Turton said. This was a powerfully built woman who looked as though she might have something to do with horses. "And this is Jack Haddock." I knew this man slightly. He was a director of companies, whatever that means, and a well-known member of society. I had used his name a few times in my column, but I'd never liked him. And this, I think, was mainly because I have a deep suspicion of all people who carry their military titles back with them into private life, especially majors and colonels. "I hope you're going to say some nice things about us in your column." "He better had," Lady Turton said, "or I'll say some nasty ones about him on my front page." I laughed, but Sir Basil drew me gently aside for a quiet chat at the other end of the room. Every now and then Lady Turton would call her husband to fetch her something, another martini, a cigarette, and he, half rising from his chair, would be forestalled by the watchful Jelks, who fetched it for him. Clearly Jelks loved his master, and just as clearly he hated the wife. Each time he did something for her, he drew his lips together so they puckered like a turkey's bottom. At dinner, our hostess sat her 2 friends, Haddock and La Rosa, on either side of her. This left Sir Basil and me at the other end of the table, where we were able to talk about painting and sculpture. Of course, it was obvious to me by now that the Major was infatuated with her ladyship, and again, although I hate to say it, it seemed as though the La Rosa woman was hunting the same bird. All this foolishness appeared to delight the hostess, but not her husband. I could see that he was conscious of the little scene all the time we were talking, and often his mind would wander from our subject, and he would stop short in mid-sentence, his eyes travelling down to the other end of the table to settle pathetically for a moment on that lovely head with the black hair and the curiously flaring nostrils. He must have noticed how exhilarated she was, how the hand that gestured as she spoke rested every now and again on the Major's arm. "Tomorrow," I said, "you must take me round and show me the sculptures you've put up in the garden." "Of course," he said, "with pleasure." He glanced again at his wife, and his eyes had a sort of supplicating look that was piteous beyond words. He was so mild and passive a man in every way that even now I could see there was no anger in him, no danger, no chance of an explosion. The next morning, as soon as we'd finished breakfast, Sir Basil suggested that we take a long walk around the grounds. I told him nothing would give me more pleasure. He took me everywhere, and I saw it all: the topiary, the pools, the fountains, the parterres and the rockeries, and, of course, the sculpture. Most of the contemporary European sculptors were there, in bronze, granite, limestone, and wood. Although it was a pleasure to see them glowing in the sun, to me they looked a trifle out of place in these vast, formal surroundings. "Shall we rest here now for a while?" Sir Basil said, after we'd walked for more than an hour. So we sat down on a white bench beside a water-lily pond and lit cigarettes. We were some way away from the house, on a piece of ground that was raised above its surroundings, and from where we sat the gardens were spread out below. "It must be wonderful in summer." "Oh, it is. You should come down and see it in May and June. Will you promise to do that?" "Of course," I said. "I'd love to come." And as I spoke, I was watching the figure of a woman dressed in red, moving among the flower beds in the far distance. I saw her cross over a wide lawn, and when she was over the lawn, she turned left and went along one side of a high wall of clipped yew, until she came to another smaller lawn that was circular and had in its centre a piece of sculpture. "This garden is younger than the house," Sir Basil said. "It was laid out early in the 18th century by a Frenchman called Beaumont, the same fellow who did Levens in Westmoreland." The woman in the red dress had been joined now by a man, and they were standing face to face, about a yard apart, apparently conversing. The man had some small black object in his hand. They'd turned now towards the piece of sculpture and were pointing at it in a sort of mocking way, apparently laughing and making jokes about its shape. I recognized it as being one of the Henry Moores, done in wood, an object of singular beauty that had 2 or 3 holes in it and a number of strange limbs protruding. The black object in the man's hand turned out to be a camera, and now he had stepped back and was taking pictures of the woman beside the Henry Moore. A great wall of yew hid these 2 people from the house, and indeed from all of the rest of the garden, except the little hill on which we sat. They had every right to believe they were not overlooked. "You know I love these yews," Sir Basil said. "Have you noticed the different shades of green on the planes and facets of each clipped tree? It's lovely, isn't it?" The woman walked around the back of the wood carving, bent down, and poked her head through one of its holes. The man was photographing her. "There's another thing about yews," Sir Basil said. "In the early summer, when the young shoots come out—" At that moment he paused and sat up straighter and leaned slightly forward, and I could sense his whole body suddenly stiffening. The man had taken the photograph, but the woman still had her head through the hole, and now I saw him advance towards her. Then he bent forward so his face was close to hers, touching it, and he held it there while he gave her, I suppose, a few kisses. In the stillness that followed, I fancied I heard a faint far-away tinkle of female laughter coming to us through the sunlight across the garden. "Shall we go back to the house?" I asked. "Back to the house?" "Yes, shall we go back and have a drink before lunch?" "A drink, yes, we'll have a drink." But he didn't move. He sat very still, gone far away from me now, staring intently at the 2 figures. I noticed now that something queer was happening. The woman still had her head through the hole, but she was beginning to wriggle her body from side to side. The man seemed suddenly uneasy. Then I saw him go forward and begin to manipulate the woman's head with his hands. "She's stuck," Sir Basil said. "I suppose we'd better go down and see if we can help." We came upon them silently, through an archway in the yew hedge, and it was naturally quite a surprise. "What's the matter here?" Sir Basil asked. He spoke softly, but with a dangerous softness that I'm sure his wife had never heard before. "She's gone and put her head through the hole, and now she can't get it out," Major Haddock said. "Just for a lark, you know." "For a what?" "Basil!" Lady Turton shouted. "Do something, can't you?" "Pretty obvious we're going to have to break up this lump of wood," the Major said. "Oh dear," Sir Basil said. "What a terrible pity. My beautiful Henry Moore." At this stage Lady Turton began abusing her husband in a most unpleasant manner, and there's no knowing how long it would have gone on had not Jelks suddenly appeared out of the shadows. "Is there anything I can do, Sir Basil?" He kept his voice level, but I didn't think his face was quite straight. When he looked at Lady Turton, there was a little exulting glimmer in his eyes. "Yes, Julks, there is. Go and get me a saw or something, so I can cut out a section of this wood." "Shall I call one of the men, Sir Basil? William is a good carpenter." "No, I'll do it myself. Just get the tools, and hurry." While they were waiting for Julks, I strolled away, because I didn't want to hear any more of the things that Lady Turton was saying to her husband, but I was back in time to see the butler returning. He advanced slowly, carrying a saw in one hand, an axe in the other. He held out both implements in front of him so his master could choose, and I saw the hand that was carrying the axe came forward an extra fraction of an inch towards Sir Basil. It was almost exactly like that card trick where the man says, "Take one, whichever one you want, and you always get the one that he means you to have." Sir Basil got the axe. I saw him reach out in a dreamy sort of way, and then the instant he felt the handle in his grasp, he seemed to realize what was required of him, and he sprang to life. For me, after that, it was like the awful moment when you see a child running out into the road and a car is coming, and all you can do is shut your eyes tight and wait until the noise tells you it has happened. I didn't open my eyes again until I heard Sir Basil's voice, even softer than usual, calling in gentle protest to the butler. "Julks," he was saying, and I saw him standing there as calm as you please, still holding the axe. Lady Turton's head was there too, still sticking through the hole, but her face had turned a terrible ashen grey. "Look here, Julks," Sir Basil was saying. "What on earth are you thinking about? This thing's much too dangerous. Give me the saw." And as he exchanged implements, I noticed for the first time, round the corners of his eyes, the twinkling tiny wrinkles of a smile.